Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to the Gentle Mastery Podcast. I'm Dave Hime, your host and guide, and the creator of the Gentle Mastery Method, Consciousness Signature, and Legacy Activation. And this week we're on stage 5 of the Legacy Activation process. You'll want to get the Legacy Activation Resource Guide from the link in the show description if you don't already have that, and you can follow along. It's just an easy free download. So this week is stage 5, and stage 5 is if you're trying to turn inner work into real life change. These 7 stages all come from my experience of activating my own legacy, going from somebody who was very unhappy in a workaday job, was not feeling fulfillment, and wanted something more. And my story, if you haven't heard it already, is one of getting very clear about what I wanted and then manifesting over $300,000 in only 3 months. There are YouTube videos about that if you're interested in going and learning more about that. And these were the steps, these were the stages that I went through, and I now use them with my clients who are looking to activate something greater in their lives, something greater than a financial legacy, because that's a 3D world or 3D reality demonstration of success. And what we're talking about here is a 5D reality definition of success, which is accessing that higher version of yourself and really going out there and making a difference to humanity beyond a financial legacy. And of course, anybody can activate their own legacy. You don't have to be somebody who's already created a financial legacy to get started in this work. The first 4 stages, which are all covered on previous podcasts, are when you're questioning the meaning of success. So it's a very powerful questioning stage. That's stage 1. Stage 2 is taking ownership of your inner life, starting to realize that there's more going on than just the 3D reality. Stage 3 is the search for meaning, something bigger than you are, something that adds energy into what it is you are here to do and helps you focus on doing the right things for you, for your specific legacy and your consciousness design. The stage 4, which we just did last week, is when you are embracing your actualization, which I also call embracing myth, magic, and metaphor, because who you really are is a mythological level, mythological size being here on earth to do something incredibly powerful when you self-actualize. So these are the first 4 stages that I went through. The 5th stage, which is the one we're talking about today, is if you're trying to turn inner work into real life change. And just one more time, I'll recommend that you go to the link in the show description, download this resource guide, and follow along with me. What I'll be doing in this podcast is reading directly from the guide, and then also throwing in my own thoughts and experiences and a bit more than is just in the guide. I would love to hear back from any of you who are following along and have any questions. So let's dive right in. If you're trying to turn inner work into real life change, you've done a lot of thinking. So by this stage, this is what I mean, you've done a lot of thinking by this point. You've probably read the books, hopefully many of them from this resource guide, followed the thought leaders, and probably journaled your way through a dozen breakthroughs. You understand yourself intellectually, but your outer life hasn't fully caught up with your inner insight. And that's what this stage is all about. This stage is all about having these inner understandings, these inner insights, After you've released old thoughts and beliefs, these new thoughts and beliefs that are coming through for you, having them show up in your 3D reality. So you're starting to realize awareness alone isn't enough. Now you want to feel different, show up differently, live differently. And so these are some of the things that would be the first indicators that you are living your legacy. You might be saying things like, I know what my patterns are, but I still repeat them. I have the insight, now how do I make it stick? So again, if you've heard me talk before about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I'll dive into a bit more because it's one of the resources in this particular stage, we have the lower 4 stages of the hierarchy, which are all about day-to-day survival in the 3D. And then the highest, which is self-actualization, is really accessing your higher self, living as your higher self, no longer getting stuck in the survival modes. But we have problems as human beings because of our conditioning and a lot of other things, staying up in that higher level frequency of ourselves, that self-actualized frequency of ourselves. There's this border that we cross between the stages of survival and the stage of self-actualization. And so making it stick, making those insights that you have when you're living above the border, that's what this is about. You may also be saying, I've done the inner work, why doesn't my life reflect it yet? And I want my nervous system to catch up with what my mind knows. And that's very, very key for anybody who's listening or watching on YouTube. Thank you. You know that as you expand, your nervous system has to adjust to allow that expansion. So it's all about getting your nervous system to catch up with what your mind knows. So your mind and your body have to have these conversations, and your emotions need to get involved in that as well. And that's all nervous system stuff. Back to the guide now. You may be noticing you default to old habits when you're under pressure, even though you're aware of them, right? So having the awareness of what you're doing and having the reliable ability not to continue to practice those old habits, those are 2 different skills. So the first skill is about awareness, and awareness always comes first. The second skill is about replacing old habits with new habits, and so we're going to be jumping into that in the resources here. You may be noticing you understand the concept of regulation, but still feel dysregulated. Your body still holds tension, even when your mind says you're fine. Meditation helps, but you crave something more embodied and sustainable. So this is what we call becoming supernatural, which is one of our resources. So I'll be talking a bit more about that here in just a second. The guide continues to say, you're beginning to sense that lasting transformation isn't just mental, it's energetic. And so that's when we're talking about going beyond 3D realm. So it's the physical self, the emotional self, and the mental self. And you're wanting to access the energetic versions of those 3 bodies, which are known as the causal body, the Buddhic body, and the Atmic body. That's a little bit past this 101 work that we're talking about today, but what the consciousness signature does, which is stage 7, is it is that bridge between the 3D self and the 5D self, so that you can sustain ongoing manifestation, sustain ongoing support for your highest self and being above that border, and start to help others. Lasting transformation lives in your breath, your pace, your boundaries, your presence. You're ready to move from insight into integration, to turn inner growth into outer embodiment. And that's what this bridge does for you. And so these resources begin to introduce you to those versions, that version of yourself, those higher frequency versions of the physical, emotional, and mental planes that if you have become conscious, started to become conscious, it's because you recognize that those are three different aspects of yourself and that you're not just one thing. This stage is where your mind stops trying to run the show and your body, emotions, and spirit join the conversation. So again, this is where you have become very clear that you're not your thoughts. You have become very clear that your body, your emotions, and then these other energies, your spirit, also are involved in who you are and how you can be in day to day. This is one of the key identity shifts that happens when you're raising your consciousness. So I have, it looks like one video and five-ish books, five books-ish. Some of them are shorter than others, that are in the resource guide. So I'm going to dive into those now. So the first one is a gentle mastery video. So this video, I think, was the last YouTube video I did before I started the podcast, and it actually could have been my very first podcast. It's that good. I recommend that you go back and take a look at it. It's called "This Lie Was Holding Me Back for Years," and the link is directly in the PDF of the resource guide. So here's what I said about this video. This Gentle Mastery video reveals the common signs that despite your growing self-awareness, you might still be trapped in a flawed success narrative. And it also shows the 3-step method to break free from the expectations of others and forge your authentic path to success. So this video also relates very strongly to stage 1 of this legacy activation guide, because that's when you start to question your definition of success. So with this video, get ready to challenge your assumptions and redefine what success means to you by connecting more profoundly with your energetic strength. So this begins to bridge that gap between who you are in 3D and who you are in 5D, starting to lean into your energetic strengths, starting to give you a process for doing that. So I highly recommend it. It's a great place to start this stage because it's got a really good foundation about everything that we're talking about here. Then I've got 3 books that I've sort of grouped together here because they are, when taken together, they are a sort of a fast track, quick start guide for helping you turn your inner reality into an outer reality, which is what this stage is all about. And these 3 books are Essentialism by Greg McKeown, Atomic Habits by James Clear. So those first 2 may be books that you've already heard about or already read. And then the third one in this sort of trilogy is Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza. And that would, from an outside point of view, sort of seem like a really odd choice to include in these very practical books of Essentialism and Atomic Habits. But it is the sort of the secret sauce that gets added on to those other 2 books. Here's what I wrote. These books bridged the gap between spiritual insight and daily action. I stopped just learning and began experimenting. And so that's what this combination of books does. I actually have them in the resource guide in the reverse order in the way I'm saying them, but I recommend them the way I'm saying them. Essentialism first, so that you can start to let go of the stuff that you don't need. Right? So that's a big part of this, is there's a lot of distraction in the 3D world and in our 3D lives. And when you can reduce that distraction by focusing only on what's essential, on what actually moves the needle, so to speak, in your life, that's where you begin to have power. Then that power gets magnified exponentially with atomic habits, because atomic habits are how you actually make this identity shift. The purpose of atomic habits in James Clear's philosophy here is, if you want to have a different life, you have to choose the habits that the individual who is living the life that you want would practice on a daily basis. And so you get very clear with yourself about what that new identity that you're shooting for is. This is what I did. This is what led me to creating the Gentle Mastery Method. This is what led me to that magnificent manifestation. I decided I needed to make changes in my core identity, starting with questioning some of my beliefs. And Atomic Habits was a very, very, and continues to be a very, very important guide for me. And then Becoming Supernatural is simply, there's nothing simple about it, but it's a wonderful book that Dr. Joe Dispenza has written about his work, his experimentation, his results, his data around how we can choose to become supernatural. And to know what that means, you will definitely want to dive into this book. It is fascinating. I have read it multiple times, and I can't recommend it highly enough in this stage of your awakening to the higher self. The next two are key components, along with some things that I'm going to go into in future stages, the last two stages. These are key components of where consciousness signature, my work with identifying that bridge between your 3D self and your 5D self, comes from. And I would recommend that you take a look at them, or at least learn about them. The first one is Motivation and Personality by A.H. Maslow. So this is the famous Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And here's what I wrote. The hierarchy of needs helped me see my journey from survival to significance. I began to understand self-actualization as a way of life. And I am not joking. If this is possible for everyone, this is accessible for everyone, I recommend that you at least Google Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs. If not, get the book. The links to all these books are in the resource guide, so you don't even have to Google the books. If you download the resource guide, you just click the link and they're there. I've talked a bit about the hierarchy in this video. I have multiple other videos and podcasts that talk more about the hierarchy. But again, it's that 5 levels that Maslow has identified that humans live through when we're living a fulfilled life. And the first 4 all have to do with various levels of survival. And the top one has to do with self-actualization, which is what we're talking about here. Then the last resource here is The Map of Consciousness Explained by David R. Hawkins. So if you're not familiar with the Map of Consciousness, it's an amazing resource to help you understand where our emotions live, where they come from, how we act based on our emotions. And these are emotional frequencies. So we're all made up of frequencies. This is what quantum physics teaches us. And there are various levels of these frequencies. And that's what David R. Hawkins has mapped through rigorous testing. And in this book, here's what I wrote. His map of consciousness gave me language for what I felt. So it gives you an opportunity to say, oh, I'm feeling shame. And that's at this point on the frequency scale. Or I'm feeling joy. And that's at this point on the frequency scale. Let me be really clear. in my worldview around all of this work and on all the work I've done with myself and with my clients, one is not better than another. The important thing is to have the awareness of where you are so that you can acknowledge that. If you're in a lower frequency, be very compassionate with yourself. If you're in a higher frequency, don't get stuck in that. Don't feel like that means you're better than. Back to what I wrote. Let's see. I could finally name the subtle shifts and energetic states I was experiencing. And it's like awareness cubed, right? So when you become somebody who's aware of your own thoughts and actions and your own behaviors, and you start to develop that awareness, and you want to go further with that, which is very important if you're going to understand what drives your personal self-actualization, then the map of consciousness is the map of awareness on a much, much, much deeper level. That's what I'm going to leave you with this week. I appreciate you being here, and I hope you will come back again next week, where we'll get into stage 6. Stage 6 is if you're rethinking wealth, power, and purpose. So this is not just for the wealthy. This is for anyone who wants to understand how humanity is going to shift from the 3D, where the measure of success is wealth, to the 5D, where the measure of success is purpose, meaning, and supporting humanity. Until next week, thanks again for joining. Peace.